Hello everyone, I hope you slept well. Today we are going to speak about API platform, obviously. About me, for people who don't know me, I'm Antoine Blucher online. You can find me as Soyuka. Please follow me on Twitter. I'm close to 10,000 followers, so help me. Just a reminder, the API platform promise is an ability to create hypermedia APIs or GraphQL in a few minutes, leveraging rapid application development, to also develop complex and really powerful APIs, and to be able to extend and replace everything you want. And this is possible due to the core library, which is on the link below. We have all packages together, almost 7,000 stars on GitHub, and on packages, when I did the slides, we were only for the core library close to 15 million downloads. API platform is a resource-oriented framework, and we had many people reminding that yesterday, so really think about that. You will see in this conference that obviously it's also possible to do remote procedure calls, RPC, and things a bit more, I can say, less resource-oriented. In our resource-oriented framework, we have HTTP operation, and operation in when we think about HTTP, the specification is a verb, get, post, put, with an URI, right? We have CRUD generation. We can define resources using a PHP object. We leverage JSON linked data by default, and IREs are at the heart of our APIs. The standalone core library, and this is the PHP library, right, brings you many, many things. Yesterday we talked about open API models, so you have really one file per specification object. And these things, you can reuse them even if you're not using the whole API platform stack, right? If you want a JSON linked data serializer, just use ours because it's been there for almost 6 years. And about API platform history, actually, you know that I'm a big fan of that. I did this small timeline that starts in 2016, where we released API Platform 2. In a little bit before 2017, we introduced the sub-resource feature, which we are going to talk about again. Between 2018 and 2009 came the data transformers. After we did some hackathon with Cilius members, and they brought their issues and API design things, and they wanted to be able to do something which were at the time not really possible. Between the 2.4 and 2.5, the European hackathon happened in April. And obviously, as you all know, or probably not, we took really almost 2 years happen between the 2.5 and 2.6, which is a minor version, and the community was really mad at us because the changelog was huge, and you see I added this small web here because yeah, what happened there. So after the hackathon, there was this pull request that was merged, right? And behind it was this code. This code was problematic. Why? Because we had an ID that was written hard-coded, like ID, okay? This code is still there in version 3, so nothing changed. But when we discussed about this pull request and discussed about the changes and how we could improve that, we actually tried to redefine how identifiers were done, right? So there was first pull request, another proposal to specify identifier differently, using ID as default, throw an error was when we had no identifier, rework to, okay, this was close, sorry, rework to improve and simplify identifiers management. What? No, this was a mistake. Resource identifiers ADR. Oh, nice. Look at the date, 2020, right? Another one, okay, let's go. So between, since September between September 2019, sorry, and January 21, you can see that we did a lot to try to improve this part of API platform. And last year was the first API platform conference in September. And after that, you know it, we released the 2.7 alpha version and then the 3. So what actually happened between this 2.5 and 2.6? OpenAPI was completely revised because first we were working with arrays, and arrays are a pain to work with when you have complex structured data, right? In before, we used the Swagger specification, and we used arrays, so it was hard to maintain. Now everything is an object, and it's really easier for us. We worked on resource identifiers. I just showed you how many pull requests and issues and discussion we had. We improved the software, and we added lots and lots of deprecations. API resource is redefined. Indeed, when we started using architectural decision records for identifiers, we kind of found out that our API resource definition was not really what we wanted. So we read again the HTTP specification. We read again the REST thesis. We tried to really be close to these vocabulary and all the concepts that were there. Oh, what happened? Nothing. And, oh, I forgot something. PHP 8 came out actually just before January 2021. So at this time, we had attributes that were introduced and which also helped us go to the way where we are today. About ADR, who is doing architectural decision records here? Oh, not many people. Actually, you can do this in your work, or even, well, yeah, I really encourage that. These are documents that help you to decide and to just write about your software decisions. And writing and sharing really helps to find a consensus and really helps to go to the right decision. So when we did this on API platform, we really improved a lot the altogether design. And without this, without writing and sharing, I don't think we would be there today. So PHP 8.1 was really important as well for us because it gives us the ability to use new classes inside attributes. So we could use an attribute and write inside it new something. So since last year, what did we do? Because last year I was here on the stage saying to you, we are going to release a new version, it's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. And we actually did not for a year. We had to refactor all the metadata system. So I was talking about that last year. Please take a look at the conference. And we thought again about operation. We prepared this backward compatibility layer, and this was really hard work. Almost in, I would say, May or March, we removed the data transformer concept because actually today, and I say this again, any plain old PHP object in API platform is now considered a resource, okay? If you use a DTO or whatever, it's a resource. An anonymous one sometimes, but it's still a resource. data provider was simplified, and we worked on the documentation, obviously, to help us release. So many questions were yesterday were about why is there a 2.7 actually. The 2.7 is only a backward compatibility layer. On the left side, you see that if it's 2.6 compatible, yes, for the 2.7, the 3.0 is not compatible. You have these namespace changes. In 2.7, you have actually both namespaces. If you want, you can use the new code. In 3.0, this was removed. There were some interfaces that were deprecated and removed in 3.0. And PHP, so this was also answered yesterday, but for the 3.0, we support PHP 8.1 and Symfony 6.1. How does this work? First, upgrade your API from 2.6 to 2.7. Read the upgrade guide on the documentation. You can fix then your deprecation that will be in your console or logs. Update the namespaces. Third step is to put the metadata backward compatibility layer flag to false. This flag defaults to true in 2.7 and helps you keep old services. When you put it to false, we will disable all the legacy services and you will be in kind of version 3 but still on 2.7. You test, I hope you have tests, and then you update to version 3. We tried really with this new 2.7 version to help you have a seamless path for an upgrade that's not really painful, okay? We also have this API resource upgrade command, so you run this command and it should help you upgrade the API resources you have. For example, if you are still using annotations, it will transform them to attributes with the new namespace. So, about version 3 now. This is what we all expect, right? Okay, this is something that scares everyone, right? Who is using data transformers in this room? Way too many people. Don't worry, we have a solution for you. So, actually you don't need data transformers. Big news. Why? Let's say we have this data transformer object, right? Today you're probably using something like that and you're declaring an operation. Here I use the post on my user class and I specified the input, which is my data transformer object. Today, this works, and the input we are specifying here is only used for documentation, so for OpenAPI, so it knows what's the content expected in your body, and for Hydra and also API platform uses this class to denormalize the data you're sending, okay? Then we have a processor. In this processor, let's see what it looks like. So it implements the processor interface, and you can see that I added a PHP doc saying my data is a user reset password DTO. If you want to keep the data transforming stuff, put it here, okay? You see I returned a new user, having this email and taking the data back from the from the DTO, sorry. So actually you don't really need a data transformer anymore and you can just use a processor. But what about this? So I used my DTO, but I renamed it. I removed the DTO stuff because any class is kind of a data transformer. I'm going to manage it. Any class is a data transformer object, right? So here my user reset password, you see it just has an email, and I actually added an operation post on it with a processor. Comment? So the data transformer object here is actually a resource, and you can also use an operation on it. It's way easier to do this than just to use another class and specify an input, etc. Another thing that was a big issue with API Platform 2 was this error, unable to generate an IRE. Yeah, I had lots of issues of that. So why is this happening? People usually need, for example here, just a collection of books. And with API Platform 2, you couldn't really, you had to define a get operation for an item. If you didn't do that, we were usually throwing, we can't find the item ID, IRE, so we don't know what to do. Today, we added an automatic disabled get endpoint, which means when you declare, for example, just a get collection or just a post operation, inside API Platform, we will create this item root that you can see the first one, so API books ID. And you see that we still have this API property identifier true, so API Platform knows that your URI will look like this. If you don't have any identifier in your class, and you declare, for example, here get collection, we will add this get endpoint, but using the RFC 5785, which says how column IREs are defined. I will not really go in depth into that, but your IRE will look like well-known gen ID and a number or something, a string. This will look, for example, like this. So there won't be anymore any unable to find an IRE, etc. To do this, internally, we're using what we call a not exposed operation. This operation has defaults, a custom controller, the read flag to false, the output flag to false, and a new flag, open API, which is also false. This flag was also really a requested feature when you wanted to disable an operation from your open API specification. You don't want to see it here. So you can just now say open API to false. I put on the right side of the screen the list of operations inside the metadata namespace. You can see that we have a bunch of HTTP verbs, and you can really implement your own operation by extending these classes or just extending the base classes, which are HTTP operation or simply operation. This is what we do with our not exposed operation. It looks like this. So, the persistence layer. We had many people talk about that, so I will go really quick on that. Matthias and Robin used it a lot for their DDD approach. Kevin mentioned it yesterday, how to use API Platform with resources, and on the other hand, for example, Neo4j, we had the discussion yesterday. You use these two interfaces, one for write, which is a processor interface, and one for read, which is a provider interface. You can still decorate our API Platform's data providers. If you want to, say, change something before persisting to doctrine, decorate the service that is right here, and do your changes, call it, and return the new data. Or you can even return the call to provide. Just a reminder, it looks like this for a processor, so we just see one with the data transformer object. And for a provider, it's just a simple provide method. We don't have anymore these get item, get collection stuff. We just simplified a lot everything. In any of these classes, you have these URI variables, which are the identifiers you get from the URI, right? If I say book/1, you have the URI variable ID equals 1. So this all comes from the work we did between 2.5 and 2.6 for identifiers, actually. This is the big job that brought us to these new features and this great implementation, in my opinion. I'm not sure I want to talk about this. Sub-resources were introduced a while ago now, and since they were introduced, they were broken. And this is one of the main issues that talks about that. We had many discussions. We didn't knew how to fix that, actually. And today, I said it a bit yesterday, we want to change a bit the minds about that and say not really goodbye to sub-resources, but we want to just call them resources. Because on any classes, you can put many resources. So if you want, for example, here, I added an API resource with a complex URI template, and this is what we use to call sub-resources. Today, when you write this on a class, I will show you the class after, you get a CRUD, create, read, update, delete. It's fully configurable, and if your case is not supported, please use a provider or a processor. You will see that it works in most cases. Let's see, for example, this class. It's an employee class, but my employee usually belongs to a company or an organization, right? So when I want to work on employees, I want to go through this organization. I used a resource class on top of a doctrine entity. You can do this. The URI variable organization is the same thing as the property, which has a many-to-one relation in that case. If you do this, we will automatically create a CRUD on this complex resource. Yes, there is write support on this resource, and you can create a new employee using this complex URI, saying that if I want to add Soyuka to the first organization, I just create a post request and it works. This feature is experimental, and it's the only feature that was tagged, marked as experimental in everything I'm saying today. For complex cases, so obviously you have the documentation, it will evolve. I need to respect the code of conduct, but please read the manual. If you have complex cases, you can define URI variables yourself. And URI variable here is organization. This was automatically done by API platform because it knew your property was a relation, etc. But in many cases, you need to tell the system how it works. And it's documented, right? Check our functional tests on the core library. Use a custom provider or processor when it's not working. If the case from before, the post, is not working, use your own processor, okay? It will work. And then if you think that we should support your case, open an issue. But please do all the steps before. Especially the first one, right? In API Platform 3, we added even more stuff. For the contributors, we introduce conventional commits so that we, in the future, we hope to have an automatic changelog which will reduce the maintenance burden. Kevin talked about the release schedule, so I won't go back to that, but if you have questions, don't hesitate. OpenAPI is 3.1 by default. Symfony 6.1. We have also the surrogate key invalidation. When using Varnish or Cloudflare, this is a popular way to invalidate cache data, and you just send keys in an header. So this is now supported. We have exception to status within operation. We have this command, I love it. It's the debug API resource command. This helps you to know what is actually the metadata behind the resource. So let's say you declare a bunch of operation, but you don't remember my conference, and you say, oh, I remember he said get operation were declared by default. Just check with this command what the metadata behind it is, and it gets a bit easier. Oh, last thing. I don't know if we can see that well, but why did it take so much time? You have an answer? Between April and June, 2 months' time, I was almost only working on API platform. It took me 2 months to remove almost 80,000 lines. So this is why it was really hard. We had so many deprecations and so many changes. And this is why also the new release schedule is really important, because we now want to have, so first we don't want you to have a pain upgrading between, for example, 2.5 and 2.6 with so many changes. We don't want this to happen, but we also don't want this to happen, because this is hell. I mean, it's so much work, you don't want to do this. So by having the major release every 2 years, a minor every 6 months, this will really help us not having these kind of situations anymore. On another hand, I think that it was necessary, because you can see in many, many open source products that this kind of things happens at the beginning. You need the software to be mature enough to be able to introduce a release schedule which is that strict. We could not have done that, in my opinion, 3 years ago. But now I think the software is getting really mature, is used by a lot of people. Thank you to everyone for coming here, this means a lot. And we can now have this. So, what's next? You asking? We want to focus on the documentation. Yesterday someone said that it was hard to find the information sometimes. We want to, I already started the work to reorganize everything to try to help you find the information a lot faster. What I also want to do is, big teasing here, is to help newcomers and new developers who may not even know PHP to approach API platform a lot easier with examples and interactive things. We want to clean the GitHub board. Saturday we have a small hack day, so if you want to help us, please come. We are going to find issues that should be closed, close them, etc. So this would be nice. We talked a bit about Elasticsearch yesterday, and I think with the new metadata system we can really do some kind of work to improve also the support and to be able to give you way more control over that. So I want to do this. We'll see if we do it or not. We spoke about Doctrine yesterday during the Q&A session. We use Doctrine mainly for the pagination and the filtering feature, which are really important for most of you. And I think that the filter feature is not good enough today. Many people want to do all with filters like this filter or this filter, for example, ends. And if someone of you know some kind of good specification about query parameters and how data gets filtered behind it, I know 2 or 3 specifications, but are still not perfect, so please reach to us. We have this put books ISBN I put here. We talked about it a bit yesterday. We want that to, first, today we are sending a 404, and this is not really good. We should instead send a 400 something. So we want also to fix that. This should, for example, create a new book with this ISBN. So we are going to work on that. We also, so we talked about Caddy a bit, and we want to introduce a cache server inside our distribution so that when you use API platform, you're even more ready for production with a cache server, automatic invalidation, and stuff like this. We will use Swan probably, which will be directly integrated into Caddy, so it will be transparent to you. And maybe your changes. I mean, we're always looking for more contributors. I know that many people helped with this version, so thank you to all of them. But please come, and maybe also come Saturday if you want to see how we are working, etc. Yeah, it's not a big deal. It was people that were happy. I want to really thank the community. So first, everyone that got here online or on site. Everyone who tested 2.7 since last year. This helped a lot. For example, also when we talked about people, they had ideas and they helped us improve even more the system we had in mind last year. So this year was really a lot of testing, a lot of people who were giving feedbacks and such. So this was really important. Thank you to everyone also who fixed bugs on the alpha version and the release candidates. I took 2 months off, so people continued to contributing, and this was really good. Obviously, thanks to Letiel, you know, to organize such an event, it's a lot of work, so people will recognize themselves. And yes, thank you to Letiel also for sponsoring the development of API platform. I don't think it would be at that point if they were not here. Thank you for everyone for your attention. If you have questions, I think we have 5 minutes or so. And I wish you a good second day of this API Platform Con.
Thank you, Antoine. Any question in the room? Yep. Oh, in the middle. Oh, man. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for this great software. And I have a question about validation. Will a new version start to turn for 100 error? I talk about type validation.
Yeah, about type validation, what was your question, sorry?
No, for example, if I send a string, but it must be integer. Now I receive a 500 error, but want to receive 400 error.
You want to receive a 500? Or you receiving today a 500?
Today receive 500, but want to receive 400 error.
I think that it's an issue that was already, someone told me already that. And either it's that because this thing happens during the denormalization process with Symfony, and therefore when you have a class that has a string type, then if you want to put an integer during the normalization phase, it will obviously fail, and I don't think we can do much about that, but probably that we can catch this and transform it to a 4.0 something. I need to check in details, but open an issue. Or maybe there is already an issue about the subject. It would be a good thing to work on Saturday, for example.
Maybe a question online?
Sorry, this wasn't really a good answer because there is no answer.
Yes, we have one question online from Shafik. Is it a good idea to use API Platform 3 for building microservices using an event-driven approach with RabbitMQ or something like this?
There were lots of words that can be tricky here. Microservices, event system. Yes, you can, obviously API platform is meant for any kind of needs. microservices will work, an event system will work, but try to have, I don't know if you saw the DDD conference, but try not to be too complex on a project. The approach should be at first simple and stupid and make things work. And when your company grows, maybe go to more complex architectures and stuff like this. It will work, and it's meant to work with any kind of architecture and meant to be as customizable as possible to be able to do anything you want, really.
Maybe a last question on site. One. Middle again. Sorry. Sorry.
Hey, thanks for this amazing talk, and also really congrats to the huge pile of work you had to handle for the past year. I had a silly question. Will API platform ever have a support for Laravel applications?
The work we did here, you know, we are talking about Doctrine, the persistence layer, and how we tried even to have a bigger gap between the two and encourage you to do your own providing thing, processor thing, to manage data behind resources. And this work is actually in the way to have this Laravel support, so why not? Alan started to work on the Eloquent support, so this is a first step. And the next step will be to just create a gap API with the Laravel dependency injection system and etc. And actually, a few years ago, before I started to work on the metadata system, I added a small part of the documentation where I show to you how to use API platform without the Symfony container, which means you are able to run API platform almost without Symfony. I mean, we use the HTTP kernel, right, because we won't rewrite this, and even Laravel uses it. So you can actually create micro API platform and with the core library to do everything you want. And for example, when I talked about normalizing JSON LD, if you need this, I don't know, if I'm in a Messenger component or even on your WordPress system, you can use API platform components to do that. And so yes, it's possible. It's work to make it happen. I don't think it's a priority right now, but if anyone wants to do it, it's possible here. And even easier today.
There is one question online, the last one.
Yes. One question from Bikal. Is it necessary to use both provider and processor, for example, even for write type operation post-patch?
The most complex use case we talk about in these cases is the patch one. Patch usually updates something, so you need to retrieve the data first with a provider and then do something with the data in a processor. So in a post operation, for example, if you are doing an RPC call, you would just use a processor. In a put operation, you will probably use a provider and a processor, even though the provider may not be necessary. So yes and no, depends on the verb you're using. I think we are done with question. Last word is I see some API platform t-shirts. Thank you for the support. We don't make money on that, and it all goes back to the API platform organization, which help us build the software. So thank you.